Hey there, folks, and welcome back inside the Northern Futbol Podcast, episode 225 on Northern Futbol. And for the first time in 3 weeks, Ben Steiner alongside Alex Gongi-Ruzic and Brendan Dunlop. Thanks, guys, for filling in for me last week. A bit of a difficult week on my end, but an exciting time in Canadian soccer. Alex and I were able to catch the first ever Northern Super League match last night. Brendan, I know you watched on from afar in Toronto and also had a playoff game of your own with the Queen's Park Strangers. So big week of soccer for you as well.
Well, I love how everything comes out in the opening tip. That's everything's going great. I scored, put us up 3-0 on 17 minutes. It went to penalties, tied 3-3, but we prevailed. So that's really what matters, right? Got on the score sheet and we're through to the final. So there's that. I'm glad you guys were there to witness history and take that all in. It looked pretty cool on TV, to be fair. It looked very cool. I was envious, though, that I didn't get to be there with you guys. And this is a great Kickstarter to what I think is going to be an amazing summer of women's soccer.
So we got our scarves, our inaugural game scarves. May as well rock them out. Just for those wondering, it's not like the Rise scarf specifically, but hopefully some of you guys got it. It's got like Rise FC versus Calgary Wild. Pretty cool. Going to be a good souvenir to say we were there game one. And yeah, I guess that's part that you kind of like underestimate when you're going into it. You're like, yeah, it's another football match. But it was cool to see like the whole ceremony before, like Christine Sinclair's face when she's just kind of like soaking it all in. Diana Matheson being like, yeah, I built that. Just like everything coming together is pretty cool and a pretty forgotten part. 'Cause at the same time, like it's just a football game, right? Like it's just a game. It's 90 minutes. You go out. They were about 2 minutes in. Someone got kicked in the shins, and you're like, okay, like women's soccer has arrived. But like the whole lead up was pretty cool too, and something that was cool to be part of.
Yeah, I think it kind of hit me in warm-ups, really, because, you go through the whole process of going to BC Place, you're sitting in the press box. Like, Alex, you've been there hundreds of times. I covered the odd Whitecaps game, and you're sitting there and you're like, okay, it's just another soccer game. A lot of the same faces around, albeit a different shade of blue-ish, I guess. But then you're sitting there and you're like, oh, this is a new league. Like, this is the start of something. And I was saying to Alex before the match, this is the fourth time in the last 7 years that we've seen a new Canadian league start, or new sports league in Canada start. We've got the CPL, the CEPL, PWHL, and now the NSL. And it's this investment in Canadian sport and an investment in women's sport. And I don't think there's really, another time outside of roughly 100 years ago where you saw so many leagues launching so quickly. And the hope can just be that these leagues are able to last. We've seen a lot of leagues come up and not last, but it was a good start for the NSL last night. And I think, at least watching on the broadcast as well, from what I saw afterwards, of course, Brendan, you saw it as well. It was a success kind of all around. Like they checked off the big boxes for this league on day one.
It looked really cool on TV. It looked really cool on TV. There was you've got quite the variety of experience on the broadcast as well. I love the opinions from Claire Rustad, as I always do, along with Amy Walsh, who was in the broadcast booth, which I know can be a rarity sometimes. Signa, who called the Olympics, and Kate McKenna, who's been a host on TSN before. Like it looked really cool, man. And the 8K cameras on the touchline, and it also looked fuller than 14,081 on television, which I don't think was maybe any wizardry from the shooting, but maybe from the lighting and the shading up top. But it looked pretty cool on TV, man, and it was great to see. And I think one of the things I always find this different when the rare time that I make time to watch a game back after I've been there live, the things that you notice are different. Usually it's the speed. I feel like the speed tends to be faster when I'm watching on TV than when I have been there. But that felt like it was intense. The way Vancouver pressured Calgary for the majority of the match, but particularly in the first half there, made Michaela Moore look like me out there defending, like vulnerable and very uncomfortable, absolutely no time on the ball. I was impressed by how intense it was on both sides, because I thought that Calgary kind of brought that with some big substitutions. I thought Savicki was amazing for Calgary, and they were, in the end, kind of unlucky to not squeak out an equalizer there and steal one at the end. But Vancouver were the better team, and now the team everybody's chasing.
So, dear anyone who runs stadiums, take notes from just what the Rise did in terms of 14,000 looks fuller when you pack them all into a closer section of the field.
Yeah.
They're not spread all the way out among the lower bowl. Like they there were some big empty sections because everyone was packed in. Pack people into where the TV cameras are. It looks better for the broadcast. I can't help but think it's gonna be a really, really random pullback. But remember 2020 Montreal Canadiens bubble run, or no, it was 2021 when they had the game in Montreal that had 200 fans, and the guys went on after and were like 200 effing fans sounding like 18,000. It's because when you pack people together, the noise circulates better. So I thought that was a good part, that like the noise traveled really well yesterday.
Yeah, and it was good to see the Crow Collective, I think it's called, a new supporters group that came together just seemingly a week before the NSL started. And it's a lot of the South Sisters that have been part of the Vancouver Southsiders for a long time, seemingly leading that group. And they created quite the ruckus. It wasn't quite the same just regular noise throughout the match. There were periods where it was a little bit quiet, but when stuff happened or when they were getting really involved into the match, it was a loud atmosphere. The weirdest part of the night, though, was right before the penalty kick that Quinn scored. And there you could hear a pin drop in that stadium. There was not a word going around the stadium. And then, of course, a big explosion, a catharsis, really, when Quinn scored that penalty kick to put the Rise up 1-0. Of course, the eventual winning goal for the Rise. But I don't think I've ever heard silence like that before a penalty kick. It felt as empty as a U Sports game.
Alex, you were there. Did you get the same feeling?
I mean, yeah, that's exactly it. It was weirdly silent, but it was almost like no one wanted to distract Quinn. It's like, all right, lock in, do your thing, and then we'll celebrate. It was like a tennis game, but no, I think that was an interesting like aspect of the crowd, and something that's just been cool, because I noticed the same thing in the women's national team game at BC Place 2 weeks ago. Like, I don't know if this is just like a specific to, the women's soccer crowd in Vancouver or what, but I found it interesting that like when the ball's in play, it is almost like a tennis like focus where you can like just hear people, and then there'll be a nice pass and you kind of hear the it's a nice pass. And then like as soon as the ball enters the final third, it starts to crescendo, gets near the box, someone shoots, then you either hear the roar of a successful shot, save, or the groans of a block. Like it's an interesting crowd, because it's maybe not like your typical match where just, you got constant drumming, a constant hum of noise, but it's like almost more attentive, almost more locked into the game and responsive to some moments.
There's going to be an interesting case study over this golden age that we're in right now. And you can, you'll look at the NSL through as the year goes on. In the next few years, obviously the atmosphere has changed at BC Place for Whitecaps game and how you would describe that experience. Very much so for Toronto FC games, as anyone would attest to. But to Ben's point about this is the first time in 100 years where we're witnessing the creation and the launch of these, big time professional leagues all within this short period. The way that we consume sports varies based on what sport we're consuming and how old we are in consuming that sport. So you're going to have a younger audience, I think, for NSL, although a varied audience, but I anticipate there being a younger audience than, say, that original MLS audience. Like those first few years at BC Place, it was much like, in my experience, it was much like at BMO. It was a drinking culture. It was a party culture. There wasn't a lot of parents necessarily in the stands, but people that maybe are a few years away from that, had just been married, and it was like that kind of social scene. Where it's different now. Some of those people are still there. They bring their kids. There's more of a family atmosphere. That party kind of atmosphere has changed a little bit, or it's been limited to sections. But to the point about the attentiveness, you said, and everyone kind of sitting there on bated breath for the penalty. Like, I do wonder if you're going to have an audience for the NSL in stadium that is noticeably different than MLS or other sports comparatively. Like, for anyone who's been to a game in England, as a North American, the first thing you'll notice is you are the only person on your phone. If you have your phone out, unless you happen to be sitting next to some other influencer, there's not a lot of people that would text in the middle of a game or pull their phone out before halftime. You are in the dramatic minority. And I wonder if that might be the case with NSL here.
Alex, I know you had a bit of a realization last night, having seen some NWSL games, especially at Angel City, where the 3-2-5-2 of LAFC are out with Angel City, and it's a very different supporter culture than what we saw last night.
Yeah, I mean that's a huge point. I mean, you see it as well with the Thorns. They've obviously got that connection there. I think it's the Rose City Riveteers, right? And then they combined with the Portland Timbers group. So no, it's definitely different. I think that will develop too. I think another thing is like it's game one. I think people are going to learn what the Crow Collective is. Like, oh, maybe I want to go stand and cheer and be a part of that. So it's definitely going to be something different because we also just haven't had a lot of opportunities for something like that to develop. And I think we talk so much about what a new league can bring in terms of player development, all these sorts of things, but fan development's a big one too, right? In just terms of immersing people in the supporter culture and what it can be about. I think it's going to be cool to see develop in the NSL for in various ways and for different reasons.
And interesting last night as well, Alex and I noticed that there were no front of shirt sponsors on any of the NSL teams to start off. Vancouver Eyes did have TELUS on the back of their kits, but no front of shirt sponsors to start off. And my biggest quip with the entire opening night is Milka Rolsma on Calgary, defender wearing number 9. That's got to change. I can't have a defender wearing number 9. Maybe it's just my nonsense and traditional positional numbers brain, but get a 4 out there and get a 2 out there. Number 9 should be up front.
On the shirt point, what I was thinking watching the game, I know this is non-traditional for club soccer, but given that you're trying to build up stars, that you have a varying collection of players, some who have limited professional experience or no professional experience or exclusively in other countries, or they are actual seasoned Olympic participants and World Cup participants, there needs to be as big a spotlight as possible on these players. And I think the PWHL has done a pretty good job with this and understands, I'm thinking about the sponsor. I forget who it was, but Ben, you would know that the names on the jerseys were below the number and the sponsor was at the top because the majority of players in the PWHL had ponytails that were covering their names. And so that was a focus to put a bigger spotlight on those players' names and those player profiles. I would like to see numbers on the front of the NSL jerseys, just in the same small font, like for those watching the Canada one I'm wearing the World Cup, the one that we see in internationals all the time, just small. If you're not going to have a sponsor there, then put the number there because you're not going to see it on the shorts. And if you're just like waiting to see the back, I just think it would really help to grow the profile with so many new eyes and even seasoned Canadian women's soccer eyes that want to get to know these players as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I think on that as well, the numbers weren't very visible last night, especially when I went back to look at the broadcast. The jerseys looked sharp, but the red numbers on the purple of Calgary, it was a little bit tough to see. And even on Vancouver's, which was a bit more contrast, it was tough to see. But I would love to see, either black or white numbers, just so you have that contrast and they're easy to see. And we've seen that issue in several other leagues around the world, and they've been able to adapt. So I wonder if that's potentially a midseason adaptation that the NSL might make, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, I think that stuff just you figure out over time what works, right? Some stuff will just look great up close, and then you learn, oh, okay, you can't see it 30 yards away. I think the Whitecaps went through that when they had the red numbers. Looked great on a kit. Broadcasters hated it. That's just reality. I do think there's a lot of intentionality with what they've done in terms of the branding. So I find this all very interesting. Like the more I think about it, I think the front of shirt stuff is very conscious because by doing that, look, the reality is when you see a lot of shirts these days, you don't know what you're looking at. Like if you're looking at insert any club here, like you can use the Whitecaps in 2011 when they had a huge bell on the front of their shirt. You'd be excused for thinking like this team's called the Bells, right? Or something like that. Oh no, the Whitecaps logo is the one, like tiny one poked up here. You've seen it like Manchester United when I was a kid. They had the huge AIG on the front of the jersey. And oh yeah, there's Man United right in the top left corner. This does help grow awareness that no, like yesterday was the Calgary Wild and the Vancouver Rise. That's what you could see on the front of the kit. I also find it interesting that most teams, like they're color rushing it, to use the NFL term. Like yesterday was a very cool color matchup of the Rise's teal green against the Calgary's purple. There wasn't any team wearing white. You look at across the league, all of the teams have very identifiable jerseys that are colored to represent their logos, etc. I think that's another intentional thing they're doing to be like, okay, right away you're going to recognize the teams in the league. Because there was that whole issue at one point in MLS 4 or 5 years ago where everyone had white kits and you'd be watching a game like, who the heck am I watching? It could be RSL, it could be this, could be that. So I do find there's I'd love to like hear more from them, but it just feels like there's an intentionality with this that's interesting, and maybe some sort of, I'll make a good story down the road in terms of how they're trying to be identifiable right from day one.
I would suspect that the leaving the jerseys blank is the sign that the jerseys are open to be sponsored. That look, we don't need to put the team names across the front. We'll let the players and the badge do the talking. This is available prime real estate. People pay attention. That, I think, is the strategy behind that. To your point, though, and where I think that they're missing an opportunity is if you think back to, and mind you, the game was at a different place, but when Toronto FC started in 2007, I think only a handful, if not any, MLS teams had jersey sponsors. And the first Toronto FC shirt sold for like 6 months leading up had Toronto FC across the front. And then in the days before it kicked off, the Bank of Montreal sponsored TFC, in addition to the stadium, I guess. And BMO was across the front of Toronto FC shirts from, I'm pretty sure it's game number one. So any of the shirts that they sold before had Toronto FC across the front. So all those people that wore it for years, that was always the free advertising that they got essentially as a club. And then BMO got the advertising from, there on out. So I do think that there's maybe, the intentionality there. They might be missing an opportunity to get as much of their name out as possible.
Yeah, I think there's also an element of if the right offer came in, that's something you don't refuse. But maybe that right offer just hasn't come in yet at the number that they hope it has. And they're hoping that when this league is up and running, eyes are on it, it's on TSN, CBC, ESPN Plus, that interest does come, and that there is a bit more interest for a higher number value. I'm sure people have offered, but just maybe not at that number that they're looking for the front of shirt.
And you know what? Credit to them that it's not Fly Emirates or Qatar Airways or something that would, really challenge the morals and values that I think that they're looking to uphold and build as an organization. So yeah, I'm fine with it being blank. I just think for the time being, while it's blank, maybe it wouldn't hurt to have the team names across the front. But then again, maybe that was a focus group test, and I thought, no, we're leaving it blank until that, Exxon or whatever. I don't know, that was the first oil brand that came to my mind that wasn't from the Gulf that you can put across the front.
Yeah, another thing I noticed last night in terms of the sponsorship was haven't seen a betting company around this league. And when you think of sports these days, there's betting everywhere. And even in the PWHL and WNBA, there's betting plastered all around, where there was no betting to be seen last night. I don't even think the game was offered on most betting platforms. I know I checked it on a couple and it was there, but just very simple lines like money lines and stuff, nothing in terms of game props or player props. But I think that's also a very intentional thing from the league, to not have betting be really a part of this, because it is very wholesome, for lack of a better word, in terms of launching this league. And Diana Matheson hasn't swayed away from her values as a person, as a player, and the league is very much living up to that in its early days. Alex?
Sorry, everyone. We'll get to the football eventually, because I think at the end of the day, for all this talk about betting and shirt sponsors, this league is special because a bunch of players are also getting prime opportunities. So I think we'll get to the football.
I gave a micro analysis, bro. Shows you don't listen to me. I was talking about how good Calgary were in the second half with Savicki, bro. Listen,
we lost our way.
We'll jump into the football now. Very physical early on. A lot of challenges going in. We saw, of course, the 20th minute challenge from Michaela Moore on Holly Ward, who was exceptional throughout the night. Ward with several runs down the wing, including one where she put the ball off the post. Quinn, of course, scoring the penalty kick. Their first professional goal in the NSL, getting the first goal in the NSL. I think they had only scored 5 goals in their international career and 1 in the NWSL prior. So certainly not a regular occurrence for Quinn, but it seems right that they got the first goal. But Alex, your general thoughts on the game?
Yeah, and I mean, the one that they scored in the NWSL, I think it was 2 years ago, and it was an absolute cannon of a shot. So they got some finishing in them, and hearing them talk after, of course, they're asked, why'd you step up? I'm like, no, I got confidence. I feel good on penalties. So goal scorer Quinn, I mean, they almost scored a brace right after. So this might be something to get used to. But no, I think overall it was just fascinating to kind of see the identities right away. like the Rise were excellent in terms of their pressing. They came out. They had 16 final third recoveries. I got all my Y Scout data this morning, which was giving me a bit of an itch yesterday that I didn't have access to it live. They press well. Calgary, they struggled in the first half, but then they made a bit of a tactical switch at halftime. They were aggressive. I always respect that from coaches. Lydia Bedford was great to listen to after as well in terms of explaining what she saw from her team and the adjustments and how they grew into the game. Both teams, you could tell, were a bit nervous on the ball. I think they each averaged like 3.5 passes per possession, which I know definitely Heiner Moller with Vancouver, they want to be a team that dominates. It's kind of become the Danish way, as we've learned with the Whitecaps. They want to dominate the ball. They want to hold on to it. But yeah, I think the physicality and the speed were noticeable. And I think that was how the players kind of made up for, okay, yeah, we're nervous. We're not feeling the ball as well. Okay, let's just defend well, tackle, and see what we can create from that.
Yeah, I thought it was intense, as I said a little bit earlier, that the way Vancouver press was impressive. But I thought that, Calgary deserved to get something from the match, the way that they played, and the fact that Vancouver didn't finish their chances. I thought that Ward was great and looked like she's going to be a threat all season. And as far as Quinn, it had to be them, right, to score the first goal. It very much felt to me like Alphonso Davies and that Belgian penalty at the World Cup, where yes, perhaps there was someone more suited. Perhaps there's someone that was practicing penalties for this exact scenario in training all week. But then you get this moment very early on, an opportunity to not manufacture history, but really have a say in how the history is written. It had to be them.
Yeah, and I think when you look at what the Calgary Wild in particular were able to do, there was a tactical adjustment at halftime. They didn't necessarily have an identity throughout the first half. Things seemed a little bit haywire. We saw Christy Gray making a few runs up the right side. There were some options in the middle, but a lot of the time we saw players, not just on the Wild, but on both teams, maybe be a little bit more selfish on the ball than they would be in game 15 of the season. There were several times where a player would make a run up a wing and not be played on through in favor of a dribble. And I think there was maybe a little bit of nervousness in playing a giveaway, maybe some nervousness on the turf. That was something that Anja Heiner-Muller spoke about after the match, was they couldn't necessarily play the through balls that they wanted just because the ball is moving faster on the turf than they've trained on grass and have prepared for Swangard as well. But what do you think tactically, especially from the Wild, which I know we saw a big shift in heading into the second half, Alex?
Yeah, I think they looked more like themselves in the second half. I found it interesting as well. Bedford kind of spoke after that. This Wild team wants to be more progressive, more on the ball than they showed. And yeah, I think that's something where they looked more like it in the second half. They played more of like a 4-1-4-1. The first half was supposed to be a 4-2-3-1, and it ended up being more of a haphazard 4-4-2 because their pressing was all out of sorts. And no, it's interesting to see that identity play out. One thing that was interesting is that Calgary sounds like they've had a lot of issues getting their players together because of injuries, because of players arriving only 2 weeks ago. And that'll be something to watch out across the league. The Rise we expect to be good. Some of these players have been playing together since last summer when they were in the Champions Cup together. Okay, how are the Calgarys going to look? How are the Halifaxes, the Ottawas, etc.? Because that definitely, I think a lot of the teams are going to play similarly. I think they're going to want to play on the front foot. They're going to want to play attacking. Well, if 6 teams are playing that way, it's going to be interesting to see who's more effective. And I thought the Rise would dominate game 1, and it's credit to Calgary that they made it as even as they did in the end.
I'm excited to see if the intensity in Toronto, which, by the way, as we're live recording this on Thursday afternoon, AFC Toronto announcing that they've officially sold out the allocation, which is 14,500. So big credit to AFC Toronto. But head coach of AFC Toronto, Milanovic, the way he's been talking about how aggressive that they're going to play on the front foot. People are going to be surprised if you've watched women's soccer before and you think it's this. You're going to be surprised by the way we play and the way Vancouver pressed and played aggressively on the front foot. And then Calgary replicated that in phases in the second half. I'm very excited to see how it looks between Toronto and Montreal and that new rivalry birthing on Saturday.
Yeah, I think with Toronto in particular, first of all, from the sounds of it, we're going to have the record crowd for the league, breaking the 14,018 that were in the stadium last night. And it looks like that's going to be an exceptional one. I think the goal in speaking to a few people around the league is to actually sell more and potentially fill up that lower bowl. at BMO Field. Maybe that is 14,500. I don't know the exact number on that. But from what we've seen from Milanovic in the past with his North Toronto Nitro teams, with some of the players that he's brought in from the TMU Bold in particular that I watched for a number of years, they will be very good in transition, very fast in transition. A player that comes to mind is Ivy Perez, who was exceptional with the Bold over the last few years, has a little bit of international experience as well. She's probably not going to play necessarily a major starting role. I think we'll probably see Jade Kovacevic play that role. But I think that that's a player that could be exciting and really fit that style that Milanovic is looking to play as they grow throughout the season. Because as we know, we will have to see rotation on all these teams. The rosters are only 20 to 25 players, so they're not exceptionally large, Alex.
Before you give a take on that, just on Ben's pronunciation, do you say all Latino names like you're an English person? Did you say Perez there? Did I hear that right? Who's the Portuguese manager? Roberto Martinez or Roberto Martinez?
Martinez.
Wow.
But I'll go Alfonso Davies instead of Davis.
Yeah, I mean, that's just incorrect, but yes, okay. I just thought I heard it, and I'm a big accent guy. Just thought I heard it. Needed to address it. Alex, floor is yours.
Yeah, I mean,
we've had my pronunciation issues in the past on this show, Alex. Eh?
Yeah, it's been a while. There's not as many players playing in. I don't know, what was some of those leagues, like the Bulgarian league and stuff like that.
I think it was Poland mainly.
Yeah, Poland. Those are always Rakau, and you're like, okay, let's enough of that. But no, I mean, with Toronto, I'm expecting big things, and I mean, I think that'll kind of be the theme of NOW Soccer CA. She's been waiting very patiently, AC, since last week. She asked for our predictions. Brendan and I had to throw not so much a mulligan, but we just had to postpone it because we wanted all three of us here. I know Ben had a lot to say in terms of the predictions and what to expect in this league, but Toronto is definitely one of the teams that I feel like is, in terms of individual talent, they're incredible. And if they can get them playing a cohesive style built around Emma Reagan and the heartbeat, and they have their attack is just insanity. I think they're going to have players on the bench who should be starting for other clubs in this league. It's going to be fascinating, that free flowing attacking style. And yeah, when you compare it to the Rise, who for me, the Rise, I'm looking at their defensive shape. They didn't even have Samantha Chang for this game, who's is injured. Like, this team's going to be solid defensively. So yeah, it is good to see that, like, the roster composition wise, some of those differences as well.
Yeah, one of my favorite moments from last night was in the post-game presser, where a lot of it was, it was very celebratory, very first game, everything pretty positive. And then HERE, and love HERE, but was already asking for injury updates on Samantha Chang, and Johanna Muller was like, really, we're talking injury updates already. But it was nice to see that it was right to the football, especially for HERE.
Quinn didn't hold back either, though. Quinn was asked, what I think the question was, what did it mean to finally get out there and kick the ball, and your take on how the game played out, kind of a general open-ended with a positive leader. And Quinn's response is, well, if I'm honest, there was some things we did well, but we're not satisfied. There's a lot we really need to improve on. like the team, didn't perform anywhere near the standard that they'd hoped. But yeah, I like that instant response. Quinn can be a player of few words, but when they do come out, they're pretty pointed, and pretty blunt.
And a question from Jeff Salisbury: when will Holly Ward potentially get a move somewhere else?
Get a move? This is what it's a hard question. We're talking about injury. They won game.
I love it.
It's going to get a move.
It's a true NFP question. I love it, Jeff.
What?
That's why I love Jeff's questions.
2 games into the MLS season, I wrote, are the Whitecaps MLS Cup contenders? We're week 9 now or whatever, and they're still looking like
Brendan.
So.
Yeah, honestly, I know. But I mean, to that point, you're talking about a 17-year-old team, and you're talking about a team that last year dramatically underperformed and was one of the biggest surprises last season. So I guess that doesn't feel as out of left field as this one.
So will Holly Ward potentially get a move after this NSL season if she keeps this up?
See, I have no idea. And I say that not because I don't think she could get a move, but if you want to position yourself as a top 5 league in the world, and we've heard Diana Matheson throw that around this week, I think that's reasonable to expect from the founder of this league, given the work she's put in, the investment, the salary cap this league has put in day one. Well, Holly Ward's the kind of players you're going to want to fight to keep, because if she's going to continue to play anything like she did last night, again, I had the Y Scout data. Those are on Blue Sky, where I post most of this stuff now. You got to see it first. So, hey, another reason to show up on Blue Sky. I know we're doing our best to put NFP on there. Ben shows up once in a while, and Brendan as well will make the odd appearance. But she had 8 dribbles last night, 8 successful dribbles on 13 attempts. That is just bonkers for any winger at any level. She won the penalty so I know that doesn't count as an assist. I've always said it should. If you win a penalty, like at the end of the day, you're assisting your teammate in a different way. She had a couple of shots. She hit the post. She defensively, she had like a sneakily good game. I think she had 4 interceptions. She won like 6 of 7 duels or something like that. Excellent game. And look, this is what this league's about. Ward got an opportunity to play for her national team weeks ago. She built some confidence. She's been playing in League One. She's been playing in college. Now she gets this opportunity. She looks ready, and I'm just excited to see all the Holly Wards that are out there across the league that we haven't seen of, because, okay, we kind of expected Holly Ward. Ben and I were talking about how we remember seeing her in 22 in League One BC for varsity, tearing it up as a then like 18-year-old, I think it was. But yes, I think these are the players that Diana Matheson's going to try the best to keep. Although you do wonder if some European teams and NWSL teams might at least throw offers and see, hey, will you be tempted?
You know what? I think we should create a segment that's way too early, and you can apply it to anything. Okay, way too early predictions, where we're predicting who's going to win the World Cup now. Way too early transfer rumors for the NSL after 1 week. Way too early seems like a good theme. So here's my way too early transfer prediction on Holly Ward's future. Okay, a 3-team swap. Clarissa Laracy leaves Crystal Palace, replaces Holly Ward at Vancouver. Liverpool sends somebody to Palace, and Holly Ward and Olivia Smith are together at Liverpool. Boom.
And
put it on a t-shirt.
Rumors around Olivia Smith now at Liverpool as well. But potentially they would want, heaven and earth to get rid of Olivia Smith, considering what she's been able to do in the WSL in her first season.
Well, she's only going to Barcelona, I think, at that point, given her level and age. At 20, it's going to be Barca for potentially a 7-figure fee. Let's be real. Good
thing she's been capped. 7 figures would be amazing. Is the new transfer record? Has it hit 7? Is the new transfer record $1 million?
Gurma got $1 million from Chelsea.
Right. Prior to maybe not the previous record, but when Julia Grosso went to Juventus after becoming the Olympic hero for Canada, that was the highest continental transfer, I know for sure. Whether that would have been the highest in England, I don't know for sure. But it was like 400,000 euros. That was the highest continental transfer, which is wild to think that it's 400,000. But the game's moving. The game's changing quick.
Yeah, certainly an exciting time for women's soccer, and we saw that in Canada last night. But W Soccer CA, your thoughts on the inaugural NSL match? We've pretty well checked that off on this episode so far. So if you haven't missed those,
any other thoughts, Ben? Is there one more thought you want to squeeze in there?
I'm just excited to see what the rest of the league looks like, and in particular, excited to see what the crowds in Halifax look like and what the stadium looks like in Montreal when that gets up and running. I think that's going to be real exciting to see those two clubs get up and running.
Professional answer.
In watching that game and the pageantry, the atmosphere, what I was thinking about was, what will this be like at Swan Guard in 6 weeks, in 12 weeks? Obviously the anticipation will be different. The novelty will have settled. I don't think worn off, but will have settled in a different way. And I think that Swan Guard is going to be very, very important. The Rise are going to be very important. All 6 teams are important, but in any industry, you always have front runners and leaders. And I think it's important Vancouver's competitive on the pitch and looks successful off the pitch. And I've never been to Swan Guard, but the way you guys and anyone from the Vancouver area that loves soccer and who I respect, the way they speak and revere that place, I really want that to be a special place for Rise FC.
And W Soccer CA, also some predictions as well. Champion, Golden Boot, MVP, young players, surprise teamer player, both predictions. Right. There's a lot going on, but these would all be way too early. I know, Alex, you were speaking with Jess Lacey on One Soccer earlier this week, and she said Jessica DeFilippo as a potential Golden Boot scorer. I would say Holly Ward, seeing what we saw last night. I'll say surprise team or player. Let's go Danielle Steer. I liked what we saw last night. Of course, have seen a lot with her over the last 7 years with UBC and then onto her pro career. And MVP, I'll go Emma Regan. I'll throw champion out there as well. We're going to go with the Montreal Roses, Alex.
Whoa.
Okay. Wow. Okay. I'll do my best to roll through. Golden Boot. You know what? I was looking through. I'm going Latifa Abdu. I just think like she had a very good scoring run about 14 months ago in D1 Arkema, and then kind of injuries and stuff slowed it down. That's a good signing with Montreal. It's easy to look at Toronto like Amanda West. Keep an eye on her. I don't know if there's a category I could throw in, but the problem with Toronto is like they got too much wealth up front. It's like they got Amanda West, they got Kaylee Hunter, they got Maya Jones. It's just ridiculous. But you know, if it's going to be a score by committee approach, I look at Latifa Abdu. I think Montreal can really elevate her and make her a proper star on that team. So I'll throw her in as my Golden Boot. MVP, I love the Reagan shout. I think I'm just going to have to go Quinn. Like you saw it yesterday. I think they're going to play a more elevated centerpiece of a role in this Vancouver team. Maybe take some penalties, score some more goals, get some more assists, but also just be an absolute rock defensively. So I'll just go Quinn. It's a bit of a boring pick, but I think it's something we're in year one. Kind of seen a lot of young leagues. It helps to have that pedigree, that experience. And I think the Rise having that identity and just like this Rise team was already going to be good. And the fact they went out and got arguably the best player in the league in Quinn, it's like that helps. In terms of young player, I shouted her out on One Soccer. I'll do it again. Kaylee Hunter. I just think that's such a good coup from Toronto to get a player of that pedigree. Although I'll say based on what we saw from Calgary, they had a couple of exciting youngsters. Like they got a pair of twins that played for the Whitecaps, the Stewart twins. One of them came on yesterday. She looked quite good. And even though, you know, physically you're kind of worried for her because she's not the biggest player, immediately she went out, threw some elbows, made some nice passes. There's something in there. I know they raved a lot. The Stewart twins got a lot of praise when they were at the Whitecaps from Katie Collar. She really liked them. In terms of the other ones, surprise team, that's a tough question. I'll go Ottawa. I don't know with Ottawa, given that they got a Danish coach, how Danish coaches are. Don't underestimate Danish coaches. Like Mainz is pushing for the Champions League and Bundesliga, Danish coach. Brentford, Danish. Every time I hear a good story, it's always a Danish coach. So I'm going to go Ottawa based on that alone. In terms of champion, I'm going to go AFC Toronto. I just think they're too stacked right now, and I think that's going to help them in a big game. In terms of bold prediction, oh man, I think you're going to have to come back to me on that one. I'll need some time to stew on it still.
That's a good shout. I like that we've got I've got some of the similar names to you guys, but I like that there's a bit of variation there. I think that Ben's trying to go for the sensational there, saying Montreal will be the champion. I think they'll be the surprise. I think they'll get in fourth, and then I wouldn't be surprised if they make it to the final and lose narrowly. But I do think that they would lose. And it's going to be 1v4, right? Is that the playoff format? 1v4, 2v3?
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so.
So we don't have to worry about. So there is the potential for a Toronto Montreal final then. In that scenario, we won't be divided by lines on a map, which I think is great for a 6-team league, but a league in this format and this in their infancy at this moment. I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, my prediction is it's going to be a Toronto or Vancouver versus Montreal final. And I would also say that Kaylee Hunter is going to be the biggest standout player. Maybe not MVP Quinn level, but Kaylee Hunter will be there.
I initially thought that the opening match was going to be Toronto-Montreal. And of course, we're seeing that in terms of the Toronto opening match. But I was pretty certain that it was going to be basically what that second match is. I thought that was going to be sort of the flagship opening game. But when you look at it, it's a little Toronto-centric. I've been there for 6 years now. But
you're a Torontonian, bro. We lease you, though. We lease you for a high fee. We lease you. You can take the boy out of Vancouver, but can't take Vancouver out the boy.
You gotta keep a quota of hikes and runs if you want to keep your Vancouverite card. And to your credit, you've kept up with it so far. So
double it down. What are you going for, 30K today, you psycho?
That's the goal. But you should have seen Alex's personal best. He was running like a number 9 sprinter out there for 10K. I think he did 10K with like a 4:30 kilometer or something. And for anybody that doesn't run, that's very fast. So Alex has proven that he's a hell of a lot faster than I am.
Well, we'll just have to race because you got those like quick short strides, and I think that's sometimes one advantage I have. I'm tall. Fun fact we've learned this week with me doing these One Soccer interviews is I'm significantly taller than the average CPL player, and I don't know why they frame me up beside them because I'm just like looking down. I'm like, this is awkward. Like, let's just frame up they're the stars. I'm just there to ask the questions. So the long stride helps in a lot of things, and definitely running is one of them.
The last thing about thoughts from last night, because I didn't get to it. At midnight, as the second half was winding down, this midnight Eastern time, I did have this feeling, especially as the game was getting good, and Calgary were pressing. They were holding the ball. It did seem like they might snatch an equalizer. I did look at the clock and wonder how many people are still watching. I think that the number at kickoff would have been huge nationally. I think it would have been an impressive number, but I think the drop off would have just been drastic come midnight. And that's just an unfortunate reality of the population balance in this country. And having a 10:30 kickoff on a Wednesday in the Eastern time zone where the largest bulk of your population is, I think that was, made it difficult to get as big of an opening number. But it's not about one game. Right. It is about having this league. It is about having, building roots and also giving flowers to markets and people that deserve it, that have built the game in this country to this point. And so I think Vancouver was absolutely deserving of hosting the opening match. I just don't know if 10:30 Eastern on a Wednesday was the way to maximize it the most, but I believe that this league will be able to maximize it over the course of the season. And it will help with, having the marquee player that is Quinn on a team that we all think will be one of the best teams in the league, and certainly one of the best teams to watch, regardless of what time it is. I just want to see more people watching.
I'm just completely out of place. I'm going to slip it in because I promised a bold prediction. Someone from the WSL is going to sign this summer. It's either going to be Clarissa Larissy, it's going to be Shalina Zadorsky, or for the wild card, it's going to be Sabrina D'Angelo, someone who wants an experienced keeper, and she'll feel that she wants to come home. That's my bold prediction.
I'll go one step further than that. I love that prediction, and that's very local to us. There will be an international from the WSL, or maybe pick another league if you want, but not Spain. Spain's just unique for this season alone. There will be a former teammate of Chloe Lacasse, or maybe a current teammate of Olivia Smith, or someone that we know as a European player that's been influenced by what they've seen or influenced by a conversation with Casey Stoney or someone, to have their head turned immediately at, oh, I'm going to make more playing in Canada in year one in this brand new league than playing in England. I'm going to come. So that's my prediction. As the summer, I would assume the summer transfer window opening in the WSL in England would allow NSL teams the opportunity to acquire new players. I think that'll happen.
So we won't paddle our way to the island of Halifax, but we will paddle our way across the Atlantic for Canadians Abroad. A little shout there to Attacking Third that definitely needs to take a look at a map of Canada in terms of their NSL coverage, but great to see the league getting coverage on Attacking Third down in the States. But Canadians Abroad, the weekly Promise David update section, Union Saint-Gilloise have made it 3 out of 3 in the Jupiler Pro League championship round, and David scored yet again in a win against rivals Anderlecht. He's now tied for third in the JPL with 14 goals, and USG is 3 points behind first place Genk. And Alex, I haven't watched the league exceptionally closely, but is this a real 3 points, or do we have the half points? Because this league system, and I've been trying to figure it out, is the most confusing league system I have ever seen.
No, it's great. You play everyone twice. You take the 6 teams. You get all these guys who are, fighting for their lives in relegation. You go put them together. They can go fight to the death to see who stays. And you get the big boys, the gladiators. You throw them in a ring, and it's been incredible. Like, I just love that for the next few weeks. And the first few weeks, it's every week. It's USG Genk. It's USG Ghent. It's USG Anderlecht. It's Royal Antwerp. Like, it's all the heavyweights facing off. And yes, it's maybe a fake lead in terms of it was like 15 points heading into it, and then it got halved, and then Genk lost a game, so now it's 3 points. But all of a sudden, like, I'm sitting there, I'm circling USG versus Genk twice because there's one home and away. Like, I think that in terms of drama, like it's an incredible format for that. And especially if you're a promise David, if you're USG, I think the USG are trying to win their first league title in over 50 years. Like, this is such an incredible story. And I think it's so cool that you got a Canadian at the heart of it, just playing incredibly every week, scoring goals. And people in Belgium are falling in love. And I think people around Europe are starting to take notice of who he is.
Now, Alistair Johnston had an assist and arguably should have had another, but it was ruled as a deflection as Celtic dismantled Kilmarnock in Scottish Premier League action. Kyle Larin also finally scored for the first time since December, helping Mallorca to a big win against Real Sociedad. Mallorca also tweeted that he's alive, which I think some Canadian fans might have taken the wrong way in terms of Kyle Larin's status as a striker, especially in the national team picture. But Brennan, do you think that this is the rebirth of Kyle Larin being a potentially starting striker and keeping that role with the Canadian national team?
Way too soon prediction based off of this one performance, but I do think that he still has his hand on that position. So playing well for your club and earning more minutes because of those performances is the best way to keep hold of that. So I was happy to see it, and I think that Mallorca have had a lot to balance this year. They've had, I think, a better season in the table than perhaps they were expecting. They ride some hot hands. That means that you leave a lot of potential on the bench, and he hasn't been the super sub off the bench that he was for Real Valladolid a couple of years ago. But I think we all know that Kyle Larin can bring more than he's been allowed to show for Mallorca. So I was really happy to see that he was back on the score sheet, because in December, when he scored his last goal, I think he had scored 4 in 5 games. So he's capable of it. He just needs the runway.
I'm curious to know what Kyle Larin will do this summer. It's like, I don't think there's any like rumblings of him leaving. I think he's got a contract. Mallorca is not getting relegated. They're not, they're pretty comfortably mid-table. Like, I wonder if he does look at his minutes and considers a move, though, because the one thing with Mallorca, they're competitive. Like, they got Mariki, who for whatever reason is just, he was, I remember reading a lot of slander about him when he was in Italy, I think with Lazio, and he's gone to Mallorca and been excellent for them. They've got some other depth up front, including the guy whose name escapes me, who has an incredible mustache. I think it's Prites or something like that.
Oh, yeah. I always look this guy up as well. I feel like the name doesn't stick in my head. I know what you mean. Phenomenal mustache, though. He looks like 1990s dad, and you're like, this guy's 29? Yeah.
That's it. And he as a striker, he's all right, but he's just got an incredible mustache, and maybe sometimes it just makes you a little more memorable in training when you see that thing flying. Like, he just looks like a proper goal scorer. So I do wonder if Larin looks, because I think the one thing he's lacked ever since he's been at Valladolid, and I think it's been the story of a lot of his European, his European career. And maybe this has helped explain how Jesse Marsh has kind of dealt with him. Like, he just hasn't had that trust of knowing every week you're going to be a 90-minute starter, that, okay, even if you don't score next week, you're going to still get a chance. Because I think at Mallorca, it's competitive. Sometimes he starts, sometimes he only goes 50, sometimes he comes out the bench. I do wonder if he's looking at his club future thinking, is there a club like a Valladolid? Because next year doesn't matter if you end up at a club that gets relegated. You just want to be in top form as possible for the World Cup. And I just don't know if Mallorca is going to do it for him. So I think that's something to keep an eye out for.
I think there will be people in his ear, both from his own camp, from the national team program, and people who genuinely want the best for Kyle Larin, to give Major League Soccer a serious consideration. And it doesn't have to be on this side of the border. I think that you think about some of the players that have been able to play into their 30s, certainly enjoy the lifestyle, feel that they've been able to manage their bodies in Major League Soccer, although we talk about the travel and turf being so difficult for a lot of people. I can see Kyle Larin having a Teal Bunbury type of finish to his career, though at the moment he is coming here with his hands on a starting place in the national team, heading to the World Cup, which Teal Bunbury never had, and chase it with the States and never had that experience. So they're not identical players for the time being, but I do think that Major League Soccer might be a good situation for him in the very near future. And in the immediate future, I do think he could walk into a lot of teams in MLS right now, maybe 21 teams, Ben, and take a starting spot.
I mean, one of the teams that even just comes to mind is St. Louis needs goal scoring. Austin doesn't necessarily have the money, but they need goal scoring. Their DPs have been disappointing, and could he come in on a TAM contract?
Him and Vasquez is a scary proposition
in
terms of size and just targets up front.
Could Orlando be an opportunity again? Back to
I don't
Orlando.
I don't think so. You've got Luis Muriel, Martin Ojeda, and Marco Pasalic kind of forming a very good front three there.
I forgot the three.
Philadelphia could be interesting, but they've got a very similar guy in Ty Baribo, but could probably use a different striker after losing Daniel Gazdag. But as you say, he could fit in on a lot of MLS teams. I even think Toronto could be a potential option. I don't think you want to go to Montreal at this point, but Toronto's been struggling to keep strikers healthy. Maybe that's not the best thing for Kyle Larin and the best environment to go into. But I do think that he would have an opportunity to start above, Brindelson, who has looked good, but of course TFC still looking for that first win, and we'll get into MLS briefly. But Olivia Smith scored a big goal for Liverpool as they took on Chelsea in the FA Cup semifinals. Fortunately, her side fell 2-1 after she put them up, and they weren't able to complete the upset. But what have you seen from Smith lately? Of course, a few transfer rumors, Alex.
Yeah, I think the big thing that stood out, and Stoney highlighted this very well in one of her recent availabilities. Like, I just love the growth you've seen in Smith's game defensively. It's not as fun or as exciting to see, but sometimes I've watched her lately. Like, she tracks back, she gets stuck in. I think sometimes in Portugal, the luxury of being as good as she was is that she had like 15 goals, 15 assists. Like you can focus a bit more on offense. When you're Liverpool, we're having like very weird season because like they sacked their coach, but they're still like in a pretty good position. And for a while, we're pushing almost for Europe. Like, you got to work a little harder if you're going to off the ball, if you're going to have a chance of beating the big clubs ahead of you. And I love that she's just committed to the work rate, because look, what she's doing on the ball is incredible. I think it's 8 goals now. She's 20 in her first season in the WSL. She has 8 goals. I say that's just like, most players her position are still in college. Most players in her position like aren't even close to being professionals, and she's doing it at this age. That's why I kind of joked earlier about Barcelona 7 figures. Like, that's the kind of player she's developing into, and the goals, we know that, but I love that we're also seeing growth in other areas, because I think that's going to be huge for Canada. Like, to come back and see this new and improved version on and off the ball is going to be something Stoney's going to love to work with.
No, I think that's totally the right shout. And for the financial issues that we constantly read about that the men's Barcelona team has, I think the women's organization knows that continuing to invest and pumping as much money in has tremendous benefits for that women's program at the club, and for the club as a whole now, and for the national team program. And I think that the fact that it's so tangibly synced, you're not going to see Barcelona as immediately impacted by some of the money issues as it seems the men's team can be, at least for the immediate future. And we've talked before about, would Barcelona be a good situation for Jonathan David, or when it seemed as though Hansi Flick would maybe court Alphonso Davies. I don't have the same reservations about a player like Olivia Smith going to Barcelona right now. I think that would be good.
And MLS also continuing on, the Whitecaps continuing to thrive. They could have won 9-1 against Austin, but 5-1. Brian White, 4 goals. TFC in Montreal still chipping away, trying to find their first win. 3 straight draws for Toronto FC against some good teams, but the offense hasn't been clicking for them. But it's hard to not talk about the Whitecaps, top of MLS. They're going into a Champions Cup semifinal with Miami, where I would say they're probably the favorites. I mean, that's blue and white colored glasses I'm looking through. But the Whitecaps are undoubtedly the best team in MLS right now. They can beat a Miami team on any day. Messi is a difference maker, as he has been against every team he's ever played against, Brenda.
Yeah, 100%. And over 2 legs, with the second leg being in Miami, you can't give Vancouver the heavily favored tag, albeit their play is deserving of them perhaps being the favorites. Eliminate the bookies odds, because the bookies odds will always favor the team in which they think they can get more money, and the team that appeals more to the general public always takes more money. If this was a 1-leg final, if this was at BC Place or a neutral venue, not to be honest that Fort Lauderdale I think has the swing of other places. I really don't think it does have a big advantage. It's the players that Miami have on the pitch, wherever that happens to be. In a 1-leg final, I would say Vancouver are deserved slight favorites. Like, realistic odds, I would give them a slight betting, a slight edge. I really would, Vancouver. But this is not a 1-leg final. And if they can score 3 at BC Place, which I think is possible, then they give themselves a real advantage going to Miami. But I still wouldn't say that that's a lock. So I don't know what the scenario looks like to feel more confident going to Miami for the second leg, that they could be in the driver's seat and keep hold of the wheel.
I'll have to disagree with both of you. I think,
Please.
I just think it's, ridiculous to suggest that any team with Lionel Messi isn't a betting favorite. Like, look at the LAFC tie. LAFC, like, pretty comprehensively, at least in the stats, and especially the eye test the second game, they should have won that tie. And in the end, Messi magic is the lone difference. I think for the Whitecaps, that's the big factor. Like, I think what I would say is, Miami should be the favorites, I would bet on the Whitecaps. Why? Because there's a lot of the quiet data looks incredible for the Whitecaps. Like, they're first in MLS in XG4, they're second in XG4, first in XG against, first in expected goal difference by a mile. Okay, that's the expected metrics. They're first in both goals for, against, and goal difference. They're top of the league in points. They don't even have their best players yet. They play incredible football. That's going to limit Miami. Like, that's going to put Miami's not very good defense under pressure. Like, I think there's a lot of reasons why the Whitecaps can win this. But at the end of the day, and I think the big question is, the Whitecaps have seen it. Like, even against Monterrey, where they gave up moments of magic, Pumas. Like, Messi is that times 10. And I think that's just the X factor that's so hard to account for. But I definitely think if you're the Whitecaps, you're in as about as good of a position as you are to face this matchup. And I think that's what's so exciting. Like, that, okay, it's sold out. It's going to be an interesting atmosphere for so many reasons, especially if Messi plays. But you do know that no matter what happens, the Whitecaps are so well equipped to go out and make the most of it. And that kind of sums up the start. Like, they just feel so prepared, so organized, so together. And every game they play, it just feels like they're adding another notch to their belt to this could be a special year.
Certainly going to be interesting to see if the Whitecaps can pull off the upset. And it seems cool that it's against Miami as well, because I imagine if it was against LAFC, we'd see a crowd of about 14,000 for a semifinal in the Champions Cup, whereas I wouldn't be surprised if we see all 54,500 at BC Place for the final of or the semifinal of this CONCACAF Champions Cup. Of course, the second time the Whitecaps have made it. A smaller match week in the CPL as well. Forge defeated Pacific 2-0. Alex, I know you were on the island for that one. Halifax defeated York United 2-1, and Atletico Ottawa continued Vancouver FC's struggles with a 4-1 win in Langley. Alex, your thoughts on the weekend that was in the CPL?
Yeah, what I'll say is just keep an eye out on Atletico Ottawa going forward. We got a question from Dino Ottawa on Blue Sky. Is Ottawa the real deal? We'll have to see them get tested against Forging Cavalry, but they look incredible on the ball. They have wingbacks flying up. Their midfield is playing right on top of teams. David Rodriguez looks incredible in terms of a number 10 that's coming to this league. So I know sometimes over the last few years, Ottawa hasn't always been the most watchable or fun team because they played more of that Atletico Madrid style. That's gone. So, like, in terms of entertainment, their first two games have been must watches. And I think to echo that, is some of the teams in the league, like Halifax, we know is fun to watch, but York also looks very fun under Mauro Eustachio. So the fact that Ottawa and York play together this weekend, find time and make plans for that one is all I'd say.
It's been a good start to the season. That's a good advert as well. And man, some of these shirts are exceptional. The Halifax ones look cool, but those York shirts are timeless, man. There's some shirts where, and the Whitecaps have had a few in the last couple of years, where you look at it and you're like, yeah, in the moment, it looked cool, but it's only 3 years old and it didn't really hold up. That's not really like a timeless style. This York one is exceptional.
It'll certainly be interesting to see how York continues to grow this season. Of course, their first, I think, full season under the Pascal brothers ownership, where they've had a full offseason to really overhaul the club into what their vision is for York United, and continuing to build towards that. But a big week in Canadian soccer continues on. We've got more MLS, CPL, CONCACAF Champions Cup, NSL. Brendan, I imagine you'll be at that NSL game between Toronto and Montreal at BMO Field. But that's all we've got for episode 225 of the Northern Futbol Podcast. Make sure to give us a subscription on YouTube and follow us on any socials, as well as follow the podcast on wherever you get your podcasts. For Brendan and Alex, I've been Ben. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll be back next time.